Have you ever wondered how many bonsai you need to have? Or maybe even how many bonsai I have? And the question, of course, is when is a bonsai a bonsai? Is this a bonsai or is it just a plant in a pot? But let's not talk these technicalities. Just to go back to the second question, how many trees do I have? Between 250 and 300 trees in my garden. Is that too many? Yes, that is too many. The question, however, is when is too many too many? And what does it mean for you and for me, too many? So there are a couple of reasons that you can use to determine whether you have too many bonsai trees. One of the reasons why I have too many bonsai trees is because these, the shoyo, these are nice cuttings and I might actually propagate them. You know what? I'm going to propagate them. And while I'm pruning, I'll just store these in water because I might have other trees that I also want to propagate. And when I'm pruning, I'm of course taking away very long internodes, right? Now, I say 300 trees is too many. And why is that too many? Because basically for me, bonsai at this stage is in the production mode almost. I just work my trees. Pretty much every day I work on my trees. And in the height of the growing season, it is very difficult to keep track of everything that needs to be done. So I just go through my trees and I very, very quickly prune. Note, this is also a good thing because I see a lot of people, a lot of beginners, they are pruning their trees and they're really thinking very, very long about every single branch. I don't think about individual branches, right? I'm looking at the profile, I'm looking at the thickness of the branch and I say, okay, this is too thick in the top, and that just goes. And that's also because I know that whatever I prune away here will come back twice as fast later on. Now this long stretch I'm taking out, yeah, because it's just competing with the top. Well, with the top, with this branch down. This I don't think will root as a cutting. Right, where was I? Why do I think it is too many trees, right? So in my case, it is just the amount of time that I have to give my trees. I don't run a nursery. I don't live off my bonsai. I do the occasional workshop or the course and I do help people out with their trees. But I notice that most of the time that I have is spent on bonsai. And then I find that 300 trees is really more than I can manage effectively. And as a result, the trees deteriorate because you don't pay as much attention as you could. The wire might be left on too long, you prune too late, or you prune like I'm doing right now, fairly coarse, and you don't actually go into the tree and say, hey, there's this one branch there. Right, now it looks much better. Oh, this is actually quite heavy, where does it come from? Oh, that's a very heavy branch indeed. This should go. And the more trees you have, the less time you can spend on each individual tree. Now my problem is of course also that I try to make videos, so I'm talking and doing. It's not good for the quality of my trees. So how much time do you have? This can easily dictate how many trees you have. Now there's this common misconception that fairly well established bonsai, so well developed trees, are less work and are not so difficult to take care of. And I'm going to tell you that's absolutely the wrong approach, and it's absolutely not true. The more developed a tree becomes, the more work it gets and the harder it becomes to keep that tree nice. The reason is quite simple. You can't allow branches to extend in a very nice and refined Japanese maple, for instance. Then you get very crude branches in the top that you need to prune off, and you can start all over again with developing the tree. So one example here, this branch here is actually way too thick for the top. And if you just look at this whole top, this top is way too heavy. I need to go back to these branches eventually. I can't because this is still here. It's the sacrifice that feeds in this new branch that I created here, which is why I can't really prune all that much here. It's going to be a big cut. But more developed trees require more attention and more work than younger stock. So that is the trap that you run into when you start off with bonsai. You buy and buy and buy. You get all these trees from gardens and you have cuttings. And you think, oh, you know what? And if they're nice and refined, then it becomes easier. It becomes harder. So I'm running into the trap that I now need to reduce. I'm reducing by about 100 trees. I want to go down to a maximum of 200 trees. Next to that, of course, there's the question of space. Where do you put your trees? And there's two sides to the question where you keep your trees. On the one hand, where do you keep them in summer? Over summer, these trees require increasingly more space. This I shouldn't prune. This is a lower branch and I want to fatten it up. There's extensions that take up space, the leaves that take up space. So what looks okay in winter might in summer be way too many trees. And if you have the space in your garden, you can just build table after table, that is fine. But then winter hits. Where do you keep your trees in winter? Now, many trees, like this nice ginkgo, can stay outside and will do quite well over winter. But some trees, I don't know, pomegranate comes to mind, or olives, they don't like deep frost. So in my climate, I need to protect them. I think it will look better without this one. And just go back to the south edge. Yeah, it's better. So do you have the space somewhere to store them, sort of, frost-free? I don't have a lot of space that I can keep frost-free, so I need to be very careful with what species do I buy. Do I have a place for them in winter? If they need to go inside in the living room, then there's of course also the partner that has something to say about that. And that is another consideration. What does your spare time look like? Because if you're single and you can just do with your time whatever you want, or you have a partner that is quite friendly and says, oh no, go do your own thing, I'll do my own thing, then of course you can have more trees than if you have a family where the situation is a little bit different. You might have kids take time. You might have a partner that really wants to spend every weekend a few hours or maybe the whole day together with you and says, well, why are you always going back to your trees? And then you end up in a situation where you actually don't have the time to care for your trees the way that they should be cared for, and your trees suffer. So think about how much time do you have and how much time do you want to spend and how much space do you want to give your trees. All those things affect how many you can have. And now you might think, oh, I'll go do shohin. Because shohin, they don't need a lot of space, they're small and it's a lot less work. And actually it's the reverse. The bigger trees are sometimes easier to care for than the smaller trees. Because they're more stable. They don't dry out that quickly. If you forget to prune the top for a week or two, it's not a big problem because the branch will not overtake the top in that period. Whereas in a shohin, allowing a trident maple in spring to grow too long ruins the whole tree. And then of course, how much experience do you have? The more experience you have, the less time you need for individual actions on your trees. I personally like to have a lot of different trees. As you can see, I'm pruning all sorts of trees, and this is not pruned because it's a low sacrifice, and this is not pruned because it's a low sacrifice. The future front of the tree is right here. This is one of the sacrifices that's going to come off in winter. This is the second sacrifice I just showed. It's staying on a little bit longer so it can help heal this wound. And then after that, oh, this has died. You see? Not enough space, not enough light. This side is not getting enough light and therefore branches start to die. So I don't have enough space anymore in my garden for all the trees. Now this is a trousseau cova, which I grew from seed. It's about 10 years old now and it's still not pretty. And that brings me to the other question on why do you do bonsai? Because if you're growing bonsai to have nice trees in your garden, you might not accept that trees look scruffy for a little bit. And you want to always be able to keep them perfectly. The more trees you have, the harder that is, and the more attention you need to spend to your trees. And that's not a problem, but it does mean that your schedule is going to be dominated by your trees if you have many trees. Like pruning back one tree is a few minutes, right? Pruning back 10 trees is an hour. Pruning back 100 trees is a week. And in springtime, these trees all need to be pruned. There, of course, there's a difference between elms and zelkovas on the one hand, and pines and junipers on the other. But once a pine does need pruning, it will easily take hours to do that well. Whereas an elm or zelkova, you can prune in minutes. They'll regrow very quickly. You don't need to think all that much about what you prune off. You just need to thin them out. But yeah, the more attention you can give an individual tree, the better they develop, the more quickly they develop, and the better your trees are. So keep that in mind if you're deciding how many trees is too many trees. I don't know. Was this helpful? Anyway, this is Jelle growing bonsai. It is pouring with rain outside, which is why I am back in the shed. Even though we have the middle of May, actually I should say the end of May, next week June is coming. I think this is a nice little tree. Here's a big scar, there's a big scar, but for the rest it's all moderately sized scars, but it is taking way too long. So yeah, if you want trees that you can just have in your garden and look at and be pretty, then maybe fewer trees is better. On the other hand, if you're growing bonsai because it is a hobby and it is really aimed at how you spend your free time and you want to relax, like I have a fairly busy job, spend 40-50 hours a week in the office. I don't teach anymore in my current job, so I don't have students in that sense, and therefore also doing bonsai and doing workshops with bonsai is something that I enjoy doing. It relaxes my mind, and therefore for me it is not a burden that I need to work my trees. But I can imagine if you have a busy job and you come home and you just want to relax and look out in the garden on a number of bonsai, then maybe you want to get only 10 max. So yeah, these are all the factors that you need to look at before you start working on bonsai and growing a collection, because at some point this collection is going to get too big, and at that point you might get frustrated with bonsai because you have to work your trees every single day. You have to spend that time. And you don't like that because you just cut your trees to have a hobby, to have a distraction from the rest of life. And at some point, if you have too many trees, it becomes your life. Also keep in mind, do you like going on holidays? Forget it. I mean, I love going on holidays. I love taking trips. You need to find somebody who can water your trees for you, or you need to have a very good watering setup at home. So that's another consideration. How much of your life are you willing to give up for your bonsai? If you have 5 or 10, there's absolutely no reason that it would hamper your life. You can schedule work on the trees. You can say, okay, I'm going to, next weekend I'm going to spend 2 hours on it and I'm done. If you have 100, you have to work 1 day every single week on your trees, otherwise you won't keep up. Particularly if they're a little bit more refined, it is not just a matter of letting them sit somewhere and grow. Right, a little bit in the top, a little bit of thinning. Unwire later this weekend, maybe tomorrow. But today is pruning day. You might in my videos think that I do all the work on one tree in one go, but very often I just do a day of pruning and then a day of wiring or unwiring, and today is my pruning day. So yeah, keep in mind that with the volume of trees that you have, you might end up creating a bit of a production situation where you are forced to work on your trees all the time. And to be honest, for a normal person like me with a job and not more free time than anybody else, about 100 trees, you're probably already pushed to keep track of those at the highest level. If you go towards the 200 or 300 that I am, you're pushed to keep track and do all the work that needs to be done, unless you're willing to sacrifice a lot of your time. As an example, I spend most of my weekends working my trees, and most evenings in summer I do a little bit of work. So probably if I count it all together, 20 to 30 hours a week is what I work on my trees. And with that I can, in the height of the season like right now, barely keep up. Also keep in mind, if anything happens to you, who's going to water your trees? Do you have a partner? Do you have a neighbor? Do you have a watering setup? I myself am going to go for a little bit of surgery on my knee later next week. So I'm now pushing to get everything in tip-top shape so that only watering needs to happen. Unfortunately, I have a partner who says, I'll water those trees while you're recovering for the 4 or 5 weeks that you can't walk independently. Something to keep in mind. Hey, this was Jelle. How many trees is too many trees?